Toto Wolff denies Max Verstappen the chance to become a Mercedes driver. The deal was practically done, but in the end, it was stopped. Want to know why? Stay until the end, this video is for you. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The atmosphere surrounding the paddock is unlike anything we've seen in recent memory. Tense, uncertain, and riddled with complex undercurrents that stretch far beyond what any press release or team statement dares to acknowledge. Beneath the polished media days, scripted optimism, and heavily rehearsed interviews lies a world completely at odds with the surface-level confidence being projected. The emotional temperature is rising, and nowhere is that more evident than within the Red Bull racing camp, a team once built on precision and dominance that now finds itself drifting into a strange, almost existential fragility. The absence of Christian Horner, once considered the irremovable center of gravity within that ecosystem, hasn't just altered Red Bull's leadership structure, it's disrupted their very identity. Without him steering the ship, what remains feels oddly hollow, as though the machinery is still humming, but the purpose behind it has lost definition. You can see it in the engineer's eyes, the slight delay in pit wall communications, the hesitation in radio calls. There's no outright collapse yet, but the cracks are visible, and they're growing wider with every session. Max Verstappen, once the unstoppable embodiment of Red Bull's tactical excellence and brute race day aggression, walks into this Grand Prix weekend surrounded by questions he refuses to answer out loud. His dominance over the last 2 seasons has made him the face of an era, yet behind his poker-faced interviews and corporate-approved soundbites, there's a growing tension even his most loyal inner circle can't ignore. For a driver who built his reputation on ruthless consistency and psychological invincibility, the current version of Verstappen seems distracted. Not weak. Not vulnerable. But distant. Like a man re-evaluating everything. His body language isn't that of someone chasing another trophy, it's the posture of someone wondering if he's in the right place to begin with. His interactions with the team have become shorter, more businesslike, stripped of the camaraderie that once flowed effortlessly. Some insiders describe him as cold. Others say focused. The truth likely lives somewhere between mistrust and calculation. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. This isn't just a matter of performance. This is something deeper, a shift in loyalty, a growing discomfort with the direction of the team. Verstappen might not say it publicly, but those close to the situation insist he's been watching how the power dynamics have shifted since Horner was forced out. He's noticed how Helmut Marko has grown quieter, how the once unified leadership has splintered into cautious factions, each trying to assert influence over strategy, development, and even driver behavior. Verstappen isn't naive. He understands better than anyone that success in Formula One isn't just about what happens on the track, it's about who controls the garage. And right now, nobody does. When Red Bull announced Laurent Mekies as a transitional figure, a temporary stabilizer to oversee operations while the team restructures, few outside the organization took the move seriously. Mekies, competent as he may be, is not seen as a long-term solution. He's an interim piece, someone to keep the wheels turning without rocking the boat. But Verstappen doesn't want stability for stability's sake. He wants command. He wants assurance. And more importantly, he wants influence. He didn't sign on to race for a team run by committees and quiet compromises. He aligned himself with vision, with purpose, with an infrastructure that used to make bold, unapologetic choices. Now, all he sees is caution, strategic conservatism masquerading as leadership. It doesn't help that Spa has become a symbolic battleground for Verstappen. The site of previous triumphs, Spa was supposed to be his stronghold. But last year, it became the setting for his most significant defeat. Hamilton outmaneuvered him, Russell outpaced him, and the team found itself outthought by a revitalized Mercedes outfit that had clearly done its homework. That loss didn't just hurt, it destabilized Red Bull's narrative of invulnerability. Verstappen could write it off once, but if he falls again this weekend, the illusion won't recover. The whispers will grow into questions, and those questions will become headlines. He knows it. Everyone in the garage knows it. And yet, Red Bull continues to behave like a team unsure of its own reality. Publicly, they insist everything is under control. They praise Verstappen's focus. They frame Horner's absence as a necessary evolution. They talk about unity and transition, like they're checking boxes off a PR list. But behind the scenes, there is confusion, uncertainty, unspoken anxiety. Engineers are working longer hours trying to understand performance inconsistencies that were previously non-existent. Strategists are second-guessing simulations. Designers are clashing over philosophies. Do they commit to a high downforce chassis model that supports Verstappen's aggressive cornering style, or do they compromise to accommodate broader flexibility? There's no clear answer, because there's no longer a singular voice making final decisions. The chain of command is blurred, and the consequences are beginning to materialize. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. In this environment, Tsunoda's struggles are both a distraction and a symptom. His emotional outbursts and inconsistency have become more difficult to justify, especially as the rest of the field sharpens its edge. His presence in the second seat is less about potential and more about politics, brand obligations, and lack of better alternatives. Yet his failures, magnified by Verstappen's recent dip in form, are now contributing to a sense of instability that no dominant team can afford. There are rumblings that Liam Lawson may receive another test in upcoming FP1 sessions. Not because they believe he's the future, but because Red Bull is running out of ideas. And then there's the paddock itself, restless, reactive, almost gleeful. Mercedes smells weakness. McLaren sees opportunity. Ferrari, despite their own chronic dysfunction, understands the value of Red Bull chaos. Everyone is circling, waiting for a slip. No one believes the myth of Red Bull invincibility anymore. That fear, once enough to keep the rest of the grid cautious, has vanished. In its place is a quiet confidence that the gap can be closed. That Verstappen can be beaten. That the once unshakable team might finally crumble under its own contradictions. As the weather hovers between torrential rain and bursts of unpredictable sunlight, the symbolism isn't lost. The sky mirrors the mood of the sport itself, turbulent, volatile, threatening to shift without warning. The championship fight isn't over numerically, but spiritually, it's already changing shape. No one is certain who's really in charge at Red Bull. Not Verstappen. Not Marquez. Not Marco. And certainly not whoever is left running point at Milton Keynes while the factory races to plug leaks they swore didn't exist. What unfolds this weekend may not just shape the championship standings. It may determine how long Verstappen remains loyal, how far the team can fall without Horner's control, and whether Red Bull Racing survives this era as the force it once was or mutates into something hollow, disjointed, and beatable. The edge they once wielded wasn't just horsepower or wind tunnel supremacy, it was psychological control. That grip is loosening. And in Formula One, once control starts to slip, the fall is rarely slow or gentle. It's sudden. It's violent. And it leaves no time to rebuild before the next blow lands. The tension simmering beneath the surface of the Formula One paddock has shifted from rumor to obsession, and now into something far more volatile: anticipation. The conversations happening behind smoked glass doors in motorhomes and whispered exchanges in the shadowed corners of hospitality suites all seem to orbit a single name: Max Verstappen. And despite Mercedes' attempts to maintain an image of calm and continuity, the cracks in the facade are becoming impossible to ignore. What was once speculative chatter has evolved into a swirling narrative filled with coded language, subtle contradictions, and carefully engineered vagueness. The kind of ambiguity that only exists when something massive is being plotted beneath the surface. Toto Wolff, ever the master of controlled messaging, has spent the past few weeks attempting to pour cold water on the idea of Verstappen wearing silver in the near future. But even the casual observer can detect the deliberate carefulness in his phrasing. When asked directly, he doesn't slam the door shut. He doesn't speak in absolutes. Instead, he leans on polished, digestible sound bites. There are no radical changes coming, he said. We owe it to our drivers to be transparent about our plans. But in Formula One, the words transparent and stable are often just linguistic placeholders. The silence between the syllables often reveals more than the official statement ever could. And Toto's tone, while measured, doesn't extinguish the fire. It feeds it. The same way a pause in a denial invites speculation rather than ends it. Mercedes maintains the official line. Their future revolves around George Russell, the team's highly favored long-term bet, and Kimi Antonelli, the teenage prodigy groomed as the next face of the Silver Arrows. Publicly, that narrative is repeated with clockwork consistency. But behind that polished storyline lies a contingency plan, one far more aggressive, far more ambitious. Verstappen isn't just a name in their scouting report. He's a target. A priority. A potential revolution disguised as a possibility. And while the team would never admit it outright, everything from their recent staffing changes to subtle shifts in engine development timelines hints at preparations being made for someone far bigger than Antonelli. The real intrigue, however, lies in the hidden architecture of Verstappen's Red Bull contract, an agreement that, while outwardly ironclad, contains a labyrinth of clauses, performance-dependent opt-outs, and legal windows built precisely for moments like this. Insiders have begun to leak details, nothing concrete, but enough to send a ripple through the paddock. One clause, in particular, has become the subject of obsessive speculation, a performance escape that allegedly allows Verstappen to walk if he finishes the season outside the top 3 in the Drivers' Championship. If Red Bull's downward trend continues and the team fails to hold competitive ground through the summer flyaway rounds, that clause could become more than just theoretical, it could become actionable. And suddenly, things begin to align. Red Bull's recent desperation to fast-track development upgrades that were initially earmarked for the 2026 power unit package. The abrupt reallocation of engineering resources. The surge of private meetings with major sponsors like Oracle, Tag Heuer, and Bybit, none of which have been officially confirmed, but all of which have been noted by sharp-eyed insiders. Add to that the noticeable shift in Christian Horner's demeanor during press conferences, visibly more guarded, more irritable, more rehearsed. It's not just about staying ahead. It's about holding on to something that may already be slipping away. Meanwhile, Mercedes continues to maneuver like a chess grandmaster playing 5 boards at once. They've maintained a calm exterior while subtly shifting their internal weight. Sources suggest meetings have taken place between key members of the Mercedes board and Verstappen's management team, informal, off the record, completely deniable. But not accidental. Mercedes doesn't make accidental moves. Every dinner, every conversation, every supposedly casual interaction is part of a larger architecture. And while they may not pull the trigger this year, that doesn't mean the weapon isn't already loaded. There's a belief circulating within the inner paddock circles that Mercedes isn't just willing to wait. They're building their entire midterm strategy around Verstappen's potential arrival. Whether that means triggering a massive buyout clause rumored to sit somewhere north of €70 million, or simply being patient until Verstappen's legal pathway clears. The consensus is that his seat is already being envisioned. It may not have his name stitched on a headrest just yet, but the engineering feedback loops, simulator setups, and future aero profiles are allegedly being tuned to a driving style that resembles his. That's not preparation for Antonelli. That's targeting Verstappen. Timing, however, remains the most volatile variable. If Red Bull rallies in the second half of the season and secures a dominant finish, the conversation could cool, temporarily. But if reliability gremlins continue to plague them, if strategic errors mount, if Verstappen himself begins to lose faith in the project he once ruled, the dormant clause might awaken. And once it does, there's no undoing it. Because this isn't just about contracts or constructors' points. This is about legacy. About control. About power. Verstappen, at the height of his prowess, knows his value. He knows what it would mean to move from the team that made him a champion to the one that could turn him into an icon. And Mercedes knows exactly what a driver of his caliber could do for their post-Hamilton era, not just on the track, but commercially, politically, and psychologically. Verstappen isn't just fast. He destabilizes everyone around him. And that's a weapon Mercedes appears increasingly interested in wielding. So while official statements continue to push a narrative of stability and loyalty, the undercurrent tells a different tale. The private jets. The off-calendar visits. The quiet tension in Verstappen's post-race interviews. The way Toto dodges just slightly when asked if George Russell is truly untouchable. None of this is coincidence. It's orchestration. And those who understand the sport, those who live between the lines and listen not to what's said but what's not said, they know the truth. The engine may still be silent, but the gears are already turning. Behind the elegant facade of scarlet uniforms and polished statements, things inside Ferrari are far from settled. While the chaos that recently engulfed Red Bull hasn't erupted in Maranello, the landscape is far more intricate than it appears. Beneath the surface, a complex web of tension, cautious optimism, and veiled uncertainty pulses through the corridors of the Gestione Sportiva. The calm, as always in Formula One, is deceptive. Fred Vasseur's leadership remains a subject of delicate debate, even as the visible flames of internal discontent have been temporarily smothered. Following the underwhelming result in Canada, whispers began to circulate, mutterings from behind frosted glass doors, silent disapproval from the upper echelon of Ferrari's corporate hierarchy. John Elkann, the powerful chairman of Ferrari's board, and Benedetto Vigna, the CEO with a penchant for long-term corporate alignment, were reportedly far from satisfied. The concerns weren't limited to podiums or championship points. They were about vision, execution, and direction. Vasseur was seen as too reactive, too restrained, too politically cautious for a team that needs bold, evolutionary leadership. But things shifted dramatically, not with a sudden win or breakthrough upgrade, but with words, specifically, those spoken by Ferrari's two crown jewels. Both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, separately and deliberately, expressed public confidence in their team principle. For a structure as deeply traditional and status-conscious as Ferrari, this wasn't minor. Hamilton, whose arrival electrified the entire Scuderia and elevated expectations to stratospheric levels, has made it clear he appreciates Vasseur's transparent style, his methodical approach, and his willingness to shield drivers from the crossfire of Maranello's politics. Leclerc, often painted as the golden child of Ferrari's next era, has similarly backed Vasseur, appreciating the consistency he brings after years of instability. Their dual support has, at least temporarily, solidified Vasseur's footing, pushing the conversation about his removal further down the road, possibly to the other side of the 2026 regulation shift. Still, no one inside Ferrari is naive. In a sport where yesterday's vote of confidence can turn into tomorrow's dismissal, the question isn't whether Vasseur has secured his position, it's how long he can maintain it. Because while the driver's endorsements matter, results still rule. And the ghosts of past collapses still haunt the walls. The idea that Christian Horner, once unshakably tied to Red Bull, could eventually find his way to northern Italy hasn't been dismissed. It's not being openly discussed at meetings, but the notion hovers in the background like fog before rain. Would Ferrari break from tradition to hire a British power broker with a sharp tongue and sharper instincts? Would they dare inject Horner's aggressive management style into an institution defined by legacy, hierarchy, and politics? Maybe not now. But Formula One is brutal. If the SF26 stumbles and Hamilton begins to lose faith in the long-term project, Maranello might need a miracle. And sometimes miracles come wrapped in the chaos you swore you'd never invite. Technically, Ferrari is locked in a delicate war with physics, software, and time. The SF25, while not a disaster, is still not the beast it was promised to be. Recent efforts have centered around a brand new rear suspension system, a substantial revision aimed at fixing the subtle yet persistent balance inconsistencies that have plagued the car across various track profiles. Ferrari's engineering team insists this evolution will finally offer the kind of mid-corner stability their drivers have been pleading for since pre-season testing. The design lowers the ride height subtly while redistributing load in a way that shifts weight transitions more predictably under both acceleration and braking. In theory, it's supposed to suppress understeer in tight corners and calm the violent twitchiness at high speed. On paper, the upgrade reads like a calculated, necessary fix. In practice, it's a tightrope walk with consequences. Every small alteration in the car's dynamic behavior influences a cascade of interconnected systems. Change the suspension geometry, and you alter how brake force is applied and released. Modify rear stiffness and suddenly tire where profiles shift, making degradation more aggressive or uneven. Add a new load map, and now the driver must adapt their throttle modulation and lift coast habits under pressure, in real time. Nothing happens in isolation. This is the tightrope Ferrari engineers now tread, knowing full well that solving one problem often unveils another. Thermal sensitivity has become another headache. Rear tire temperatures have become notoriously difficult to manage during races with fluctuating conditions. If the track heats up or cools unexpectedly, the car either over-rotates or becomes sluggish on turn-in. The new suspension aims to help here too, but the effect is incremental, not transformational. Ferrari is no longer chasing big, dramatic leaps. They're targeting thousandths, millimeters, and half degrees. The era of throwing new concepts onto the car and hoping for magic is over. Precision is now the currency. Internally, the mood is complex, neither confident nor panicked. The engineers are working around the clock, but with a subdued intensity. The usual bravado is gone. In its place, clinical focus. Mechanics whisper about incremental progress. Strategy leads are being more conservative. Data analysts are triple-checking simulations before greenlighting any new deployment. Nothing is rushed. Everything is vetted. Because every mistake carries consequences that echo for weeks, even months. One misstep, and suddenly Mercedes or McLaren leapfrog you in the standings. One misjudgment, and your top-tier driver starts scanning the paddock for better options. Lewis Hamilton, for all his calm public demeanor, is watching closely. He may not show it, but he's measuring every decision, every upgrade, every race weekend against the promises made to him behind closed doors. He didn't come to Ferrari for fourth-place finishes and polite press releases. He came for legacy, for greatness. And if that vision begins to fade, his loyalty may not outlast his ambition. Charles Leclerc is quieter about it, but no less aware. He's grown up in the system, but he's seen too many false dawns to put blind faith in the red overalls forever. So Ferrari moves forward. Slowly, carefully, strategically, but also under pressure so dense it weighs on every meeting, every simulation, every lap. They're not in crisis. Not yet. But they are in transition. And in Formula One, transitions are where empires rise or collapse. Elsewhere in the paddock, away from the swirling storm clouds surrounding the usual suspects, Aston Martin continues to operate in stealth mode, carefully straddling the line between unpredictability and irrelevance. There's been no official announcement, no media fanfare, but whispers from deep inside Silverstone suggest something substantial is coming. Not a routine tweak. Not a conservative adjustment. A fundamental shift. Something big enough to alter their trajectory, if not for the championship, then for the psychological battle of midfield supremacy. The team has refused to clarify what exactly is being introduced this weekend, and that silence has only amplified curiosity. Garage insiders are tight-lipped, communication staff are evasive, and even the normally transparent performance briefings have become cloaked in ambiguity. The paddock rumor mill is in overdrive. Some believe it's a radically re-engineered floor, others insist it's a complete aerodynamic overhaul inspired by mid-season data extrapolations from earlier street circuits. There's even talk of an untested suspension geometry being quietly embedded into the car's architecture, a risk if true, but one that signals the team is tired of playing it safe. They're swinging. Whether they connect or miss entirely remains unknown. What's certain is that the pressure is mounting, and expectations are quietly ballooning. Lance Stroll finds himself once again at a strange crossroads, racing on semi-familiar ground, in the country of his maternal lineage, with the spotlight dimmed but still lingering. The narrative around him has long since shifted from promise to patience to uncertainty. Spa is a brutal place to gamble for redemption. It's unforgiving, unpredictable, and the threat of rain looms large. And yet, if chaos does strike, it could be the great equalizer. He needs something to shake the table. A mad qualifying session. A red flag lottery. Anything. Because the window of narrative sympathy is closing. Fast. This is not just another race. It feels like a referendum on his relevance. In the background, Aston Martin's engineers are reportedly operating at maximum capacity, not for spectacle, but for internal validation. The failure of their early season upgrade package lingers like an open wound. They need a moment. A turnaround. A statement of technical resilience. Their current development philosophy is said to be rooted in desperation, not recklessness, but a boldness born from disappointment. If this next upgrade doesn't deliver measurable gains, there are whispers that the internal project timelines for the 2025 car might be pushed forward by months. Quiet restructuring has already begun. Meanwhile, Red Bull is refusing to stand still, even as the bulk of attention shifts toward their next-generation project. While other teams slowly begin redirecting their technical efforts into the long-view game, Milton Keynes is still squeezing every drop of potential out of the RB21. This isn't an afterthought, it's a calculated retention strategy. The introduction of a new front wing at Spa has not gone unnoticed. Sources suggest it's more than just a reprofiled element. It may be part of a broader experimental package designed not only to test technical boundaries, but to gauge Verstappen's psychological investment. Behind closed doors, there's growing awareness that this season, dominant or not, might not be enough to keep Verstappen completely satisfied. He's tasted near perfection, and the RB21, while still fearsome, doesn't offer the same stranglehold over the field as its predecessor. The margins have tightened. The threats have multiplied. Ferrari is inconsistent but dangerous. McLaren is methodical and surging. Mercedes, while still adrift in some areas, is always lurking. And Verstappen, sharp as ever, isn't blinded by past glories. He knows exactly where the deficiencies lie. He sees the gaps. He hears the hesitation in strategy calls. He's aware that Red Bull is no longer operating with the clinical certainty it once did. The upcoming tweak to the front end is scheduled to coincide with an additional update slotted for Hungary, another highly sensitive aerodynamic revision that could impact balance, turn-in precision, and low-speed traction. Both adjustments are being pitched as tools to address specific weaknesses exposed earlier this season. But internally, some believe they serve another purpose: keeping Max invested, keeping him engaged, giving him just enough of a reason to believe in the project, even as his gaze slowly begins drifting toward other possibilities. The unspoken truth in the paddock is that loyalty in Formula One is conditional. Momentum governs allegiance, not sentiment. And while Verstappen remains the face of Red Bull's empire, those close to him say he's starting to examine the escape routes. Max isn't bluffing. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, there's a precision to his words that leaves no doubt. He's aware of how power functions in this sport. He's not going to be dragged into a downward spiral out of misplaced loyalty. He's seen it happen to others. He won't allow it to happen to him. If this car continues to fall short of his expectations, or if the internal dynamics begin to erode further, his next move could be sudden, even explosive. The performance clause in his contract is not ceremonial. It's actionable. And those close to the top at Red Bull know it. That's why the upgrades are still flowing, not just to improve lap times, but to stabilize the emotional core of the team's most critical asset. If Verstappen starts to detach, the implications stretch far beyond results on track. Sponsors, personnel, future signings, everything is connected to his presence. His belief in the project is the glue holding the operation together. Lose that, and Red Bull becomes vulnerable in ways it hasn't been in years. So while the media focuses on the title race, and fans debate sector times and tire wear, something far more fragile is unfolding behind the scenes. A team trying to hold on to the man who made them untouchable. A driver quietly weighing whether the next chapter of his story will still be written in red and blue, or whether it's time to chase something new, before the dominance fades and the illusion of control breaks entirely. The paddock is buzzing with a tension that's becoming harder to suppress, and at the center of it all lies a storm that refuses to die down. While the racing headlines are filled with overtakes, upgrades, and tire strategies, the real drama is unfolding away from the cameras, in the murky, shadowy space between regulation and manipulation, between rivalry and cooperation, between sporting integrity and corporate empire building. The most recent catalyst? An FIA investigation so volatile, so politically radioactive, that even seasoned insiders are calling it one of the most delicate inquiries in recent Formula One history. The controversy is explosive. Red Bull owns not one, but two teams. And for many, that's not just a question of fairness, it's a direct threat to the credibility of the entire championship. Zak Brown, never shy about speaking out, has become the loudest critic of the current structure. His frustration is visceral, almost theatrical, but it's not without foundation. His concern isn't rooted in envy or rivalry, it's about the competitive architecture of the sport itself. When a single corporate entity holds the keys to two entries on the grid, the potential for coordinated strategy, subtle manipulation, or even indirect interference becomes very real. If Verstappen is slicing through the field and Tsunoda happens to be ahead, does he resist the pass, or does he open the door just wide enough? When both teams claim they operate independently, can we really believe that, especially when their facilities are geographically close, their personnel often rotate, and their long-term strategic interests clearly align? The FIA has insisted that new digital firewalls, stricter IT protocols, and enforced data separation have been implemented between Red Bull Racing and Visa Cash App RB. These measures are designed, in theory, to prevent cross-pollination of confidential information and setup data. But theory rarely holds up under pressure. The other teams know that the line between clean separation and gray area collaboration is thinner than ever. There's a quiet consensus in the paddock that the FIA's words sound strong, but their bite rarely matches their bark. Enforcement is patchy, loopholes are expertly navigated, and the political will to deliver real consequences often dissolves under the weight of corporate influence. Team principles are outwardly composed, but behind closed doors, the suspicion is relentless. Alpine, Aston Martin, and even Ferrari have voiced concerns, quietly, carefully, but with growing unease. The sentiment is the same across the board. The two-team model gives Red Bull a strategic safety net no other outfit can replicate. Whether it's experimenting with setups on one car and applying learnings to the other, managing on-track traffic in subtle ways, or aligning political narratives across both garages, the influence is undeniable. And no matter how many IT departments are involved, no firewall can block ambition when it's protected by millions in funding and a network of loyal personnel. And just when it seemed things couldn't get more opaque, a new twist emerged, one that broke the internet in a matter of hours. Max Verstappen's mysterious 5-hour stop in Sardinia didn't just spark interest, it ignited a wildfire. Private jet trackers followed every movement, from wheels up to wheels down, while Twitter turned into a live investigation board filled with screenshots, flight paths, and conspiracy threads worthy of a Netflix docuseries. The timing, the location, the silence, it all added fuel to an already raging fire of speculation. Officially, it was shrugged off. Toto Wolff, ever the poker player, chuckled at the rumors and threw out clever one-liners about people creating aviation collages and confusing vacation spots with boardrooms. But no one seriously believes Verstappen spends 5 hours island hopping for leisure in the middle of a championship campaign. It wasn't a getaway. It was a mission. Whether he flew in for a discreet sit-down with Mercedes' top brass or took a private meeting with legal teams to assess future contract options, one thing is clear, something serious happened in Sardinia. The timing raises questions nobody can answer publicly. With Mercedes still searching for a definitive replacement for Hamilton, and Verstappen's relationship with Red Bull growing increasingly complicated due to internal friction, media pressure, and lingering rumors of strategic disagreements, the dots are lining up. The only thing missing is confirmation. And that, as everyone in Formula One knows, comes only when it can no longer be denied. The implications are staggering. If Verstappen is seriously considering a move, if talks are underway, if lawyers have been consulted, if future pathways are being drafted in quiet corners of Europe, then the entire balance of power in Formula One is about to shift. Not gradually, not politely, but violently. A transfer of that magnitude would send aftershocks across every team's development strategy, sponsorship roadmap, and driver negotiation for the next 3 years. And it wouldn't just be a driver change. It would be a declaration. A message that even in the most dominant team of the era, internal fractures can't be sealed by trophies. That even the reigning champion isn't immune to politics, pressure, or the desire for something different. It would mean that loyalty, like everything else in this sport, is temporary, conditional on power, performance, and trust. And trust, in the current Red Bull ecosystem, feels thinner than ever. The FIA, meanwhile, finds itself watching chaos unfold from a distance it can't afford. If they act too slowly, they'll lose control of the narrative. If they intervene too harshly, they'll ignite war with the sport's most powerful stakeholders. And if they do nothing, they'll confirm what many already believe, that they're simply spectators in a game they claim to govern. This isn't a scandal contained in documents or press releases. It's a live, breathing drama with consequences that will reshape the sport. Red Bull is playing chess with itself. Verstappen is rewriting his own rules. And the rest of the grid is left to watch, calculate, and prepare for the impact, because when this next domino falls, it won't just shake one team. It will fracture the illusion that Formula One is built on equal ground. The tension in the Formula One world right now isn't just on the track. It's exploding across social media, forums, and every fan group imaginable, as debates around the mid-season driver rankings reach an absolute boiling point. It's not just a light discussion anymore. It's turned into an all-out war of opinions, statistics, biases, and emotional allegiances. And this time, it's YouTube analyst Tomo at the center of the firestorm. Known for his hot takes and fearless delivery, Tomo decided to drop his mid-season rankings, and within minutes, the community ignited. What started as a simple list turned into a battleground. Tomo placed Nico Hülkenberg in third, a ranking that left jaws on the floor and keyboards ablaze. Fans flooded the comments, questioning how a driver who hasn't stood on a podium, hasn't pulled off any major overtakes that shifted the tide of a race, and has struggled in the lower midfield could possibly deserve that spot over names like Sainz, Norris, Russell, or Alonso. And then there was Lance Stroll, buried at the bottom of the pile, dead last, as if every point, every grinded-out performance, every piece of hard-fought progress had been erased in a single click. But that wasn't even the most controversial move. Somehow, Alex Albon was slotted ahead of not just Carlos Sainz, but also Charles Leclerc, a choice that seemed to pour gasoline on an already burning fire. Sure, Albon has performed miracles with an underdeveloped Williams car, and yes, his defensive driving has earned respect across the grid. But to elevate him above the Ferrari duo, both of whom have qualified in the front rows, battled wheel-to-wheel with Verstappen, and kept Ferrari in contention, felt like a case of severe recency bias to many. Tomo's community poll, interestingly, told a completely different story. Fans voting independently placed Verstappen comfortably in the top spot, with Russell and Norris climbing high due to their consistency and relentless pace under pressure. Piastri, who Tomo had ranked first, was still admired but didn't lead the votes, indicating that while his talent is undeniable, some viewers still need more than flashes of brilliance before crowning him the driver of the season. That difference between fan polls and influencer lists sparked another round of outrage, with some calling out the disconnect between YouTubers chasing engagement and fans who are laser-focused on pure performance metrics. And then there's Lewis Hamilton, somehow relegated to a surprisingly low position in both Tomo's list and the fan poll, despite the fact that he's still right behind Leclerc in the championship standings. Many pointed out that Hamilton is driving a car that's still undergoing a complete overhaul, a season of transition, adaptation, and experimentation, and yet he remains in striking distance of drivers in far more stable machinery. That fact alone, in the minds of many, should elevate him higher. But instead, he's being treated like an afterthought. A legend in the middle of a rebirth, ignored, underestimated, and disrespected once again. As the debate rages on across platforms, Reddit threads stretching into the thousands of comments, X, formerly Twitter, turning into a minefield of hot takes, and Discord channels lit up with theories, the drivers themselves remain silent, at least publicly. But you can feel it. These rankings aren't just harmless chatter. They get back to the paddock. They fuel the fire. They stir up personal rivalries. They affect morale. No one likes being told they're underperforming. And no one forgets being overlooked. Meanwhile, while fans clash over driver rankings, a far more unpredictable variable is looming large over the weekend: the weather. Spa-Francorchamps has always been synonymous with chaos, and this year looks to be no exception. Meteorologists are calling for constant instability, intermittent showers, isolated thunderstorms, and the kind of microclimate madness that makes Spa a living nightmare for strategists. One moment it's bone dry on the Kemmel Straight, and the next, the bus stop chicane is drowning in water. Friday's practice sessions could be completely useless if rain hits only part of the track. Sprint qualifying on Saturday might become a lottery, where one well-timed tire change could determine the entire grid. And Sunday's Grand Prix? It could descend into absolute anarchy. With such close margins between teams and every point now carrying massive championship implications, Spa's weather could make or break title dreams. Verstappen will be aiming to extend his lead and silence doubters, who claim he's only dominant in perfect conditions. Hamilton might see the rain as his great equalizer, the chaos that finally gives him a chance to out-strategize and outdrive the pack. Toto Wolff and Fred Vasseur, each managing teams under immense pressure, know that a single wrong call could undo weeks of progress. This isn't just another race weekend, it's a critical turning point, a potential reshuffling of power, a place where the strongest could falter and the underestimated might finally rise. Everyone will be watching tire choices, pit wall decisions, driver instincts, and the skies above. And now it's your turn to weigh in. What do you make of the rankings? Do you think Piastri deserves the top spot? Has Hamilton been unfairly treated? Is Albon really outperforming Ferrari's golden boys? And how do you see the Spa madness unfolding? Will it be chaos or calculated brilliance? Drop your theories, your predictions, and your controversial takes in the comments. If you're craving more raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest F1 breakdowns, smash that like button and make sure to subscribe. Because here, we don't just talk about racing, we dig into the pulse of the paddock and bring you the stories they don't want you to hear.